Brian Oliver presents Haunting Tales of Madness!
Derek Loved Sam, written by Brian Oliver, narrated by Daniel Oliver. Derek loved Sam. Sam seemed happy too. Derek would give Sam the world if it was possible. Derek would never forget the moment he first laid eyes on Sam. Sam's wavy hair, blue eyes, and simple way of being. Sam's ever-present smile. Sam was the bee's knees to Derek. If it wasn't for Sam, there would be very little that Derek liked about Sandpoint, Idaho, other than skiing at the resort. Derek first brought Sam home with him after having a wild night out, following what was at the time the worst week of his professional life. His boss was a real hard-ass who cared mostly for profits over people. Derek had to fight him about letting go of one of the lower-end employees, and the argument lasted nearly half the workday. By the time it was over, Derek was spent and needed to blow off steam. Getting to know Sam was the perfect antidote to how depressed Derek was feeling. While on his little bender, Derek had gone into an alleyway to take a leak. The line into the next bar was too long to wait to be inside to relieve himself. After he zipped up, he turned behind him and saw Sam. It may not have been the most likely place for him to discover someone who would be so important to him, but it was also not totally out of the realm of possibility. Things really started to fall into place. Sam never bothered Derek as previous partners did. Sam never bitched about Derek spending too much time playing online video games. Sam never argued about Derek's suggestions for dinner. Fighting just simply was not what Sam was about. Derek did not want to dominate the relationship, but was glad things weren't a battle over what he considered trivial matters. If their one-bedroom flat smelled too much like garlic because Italian food was on the menu, Sam didn't get riled up. If Sam spent too much time lounging about, Derek didn't get upset. The pair seemed to have things figured out. Derek walked toward his office building on a Monday morning. It had been raining early on, and the parking lot had that glorious post-rain smell, and the air was cool enough to be comfortable without the need for a jacket. Derek pulled a full breath into his lungs and sighed a giddy sigh as he looked around, reaching for the glass door. The decades-old carpet that greeted him had a slight orange tint and really made the rest of the building feel very institutionalized. It may as well have been an institution with how mundane the day-to-day was. The director of the facility, Mr. Locking, saw Derek coming in and rose from his office chair. His personal workspace was musty and full of papers, books, and a computer that belonged in a museum. Locking was close to elderly, smelled of musk, and dressed like a man who thought the 60s would never die. He was bald, with graying hair on the sides of his head, a pencil mustache, and a frail-looking appearance. Even so, he had a stance of a man of authority. As he came up to Derek, the look on his face was stern. "Care to explain to me why you're late again?" "I am. It's 8 o'clock. The workday starts at 8. To be early is to be on time, and to be on time is to be late. One should arrive early to be ready to go at 8. Are you going to pay me to be here early?" By this point, many of the others were looking out from their offices and cubicles to watch the interaction. Derek had taken out his phone and turned it on to record video as he awaited Mr. Locking's response. Mr. Locking looked around and adjusted his tie. "Very well. Get clocked in. There's much work to do." Trying to save face, Mr. Locking went back to his office and slammed his door. At lunch, Derek was treated like the belle of the ball. All the co-workers wanted to know how he had the guts to stand up to their boss. Derek tried to keep everyone on an even keel. However, he did like the attention, and he knew he would be excited when he recounted the story at home to Sam. Derek looked around at his co-workers and smiled as a new idea entered his head. Everyone loves a dinner party, and perhaps they would love to meet Sam. He had only been out with his co-workers on the rarest of occasions, but perhaps this might turn things around. Derek spent the rest of the week making small talk with his colleagues, getting to know what they liked, so perhaps he could throw the perfect party. Tessa was a fan of red wines and cheeses. Her fiancé Mark, who worked just down the hall, was a self-proclaimed trivia game king. Tig and Natasha, both their desks were equidistant to Derek's, would be happy to bring deli trays and shrimp cocktails. Then there was Stephen. Stephen was the muscle of the office, a big man with a bigger laugh. He would be sure to bring the keg, and he had his own tap. Blue Moon okay? Of course, no room to be picky. That left Mr. Locking. Derek did not want to make the bad blood worse, so he informed the others that he would make sure Mr. Locking felt included. They had their concerns, but wanted to support Derek. Thursday afternoon, Derek gave a friendly knock on Locking's door, and then took a seat when offered. "What do you need, Derek?" Locking's tone was cold. "Well, Mr. Locking, sir, I'm having a little party tomorrow night, and thought perhaps you might want to join us." "A party?" His tone began to lighten. "Call it team building, if that makes you feel better." Derek gave a kind smile to show he was giving an olive branch. Locking smiled back and reached his hand across the table to shake Derek's. "What time?" "Party's at 7, sir. Want to come early to help me set up? You can meet Sam." "That sounds very nice. 6 o'clock work?" The co-workers had decided to carpool. This would give them all a chance to have a good time, but also a safe out in case the party was lame. They would hate to bail on Derek, but with Locking being invited, they felt this was best. Stephen had agreed to drive. He had loaded the keg in the back of his SUV and then made the rounds picking up Tig and Natasha, then Mark and Tessa. There were plenty of laughs on the way to Derek and Sam's apartment. As they pulled in, Stephen looked at Mark. "Which apartment number? 210? Ah, shit." Stephen looked ahead and realized the keg would need to be taken up a flight of stairs and down a hallway. He sighed, and then as everyone got out, he tossed the tap to Mark. "You carry the heavy part, Mark." "Ha!" Mark smiled as he caught the tap and looked very impressed as Stephen picked up the keg and hauled it up. Tessa bit her lip and Mark nudged her. "Babe?" "What? I'm sorry, but that's hot. He's like our own personal Hercules." Tig laughed at the pair. "I'm gay as hell and even I think that's hot. Let's get drunk." "Tig, when do you not want to get drunk?" Natasha giggled and ran after Stephen. The group joked and teased one another as they made it to the door, party supplies in hand. Natasha gave a hefty knock with Stephen directly behind her. He breathed heavily but was not about to act as if the keg was getting too heavy. Soon as Derek opened the door, however, Stephen was first in. Derek told him to go left to set the keg in the kitchen. Tessa took a deep breath. "A little heavy on the potpourri, Derek." "Whew." Derek grinned shyly. "It's one of those plug-in things. There's a smell from my neighbors that wafts up, so I have to keep lots of fragrant stuff going to cover it up." Tessa nodded. "I have downstairs neighbors too, but all I ever smell from them is pot." "Speaking of which," Tess took out her wax vape pen and indulged. The others all greeted Derek with a smile and a hug. Tig even gave him a friendly peck on the cheek. "So where is this Sam we've heard so much about?" Derek grinned as wide as a groom on his wedding day. "Dining room is down the hall and to the right." Sam is excited. Mr. Locking seems pretty happy too, though he was later than expected. Hardly gave us time to prepare, Derek said with a genuine pleasantness. "Well, hell's bells, Derek." Tig helped Stephen open the keg. Once they all had their beers, Natasha started to lead the others to the dining room. She was the first one in. As she looked behind her, she joked to Tig, "Which of us gets dibs on She screamed, a shrill scream, as she turned toward the dining room table and dropped her beer to the floor. Tig nearly bumped into her from shock and then immediately vomited. Tessa, Mark, and Stephen rushed to their friends as the horror hit their faces. Derek looked worried as he caught up. "What's wrong? Did Sam say something inappropriate?" The screams and cries that came from the others really seemed to upset Derek. He looked frustrated at Sam and shook his head. Sam sat at the head of the table. The smile was broad, but the wires that were protruding Sam's skin were not keeping the smile even. The flies swarming around Sam flew equally between Sam and Mr. Locking. Mr. Locking was in his seat, with a party hat on his head, and his body was not yet nearly as decayed as Sam's. Locking's eyes were starting to cloud up. The smile on his face contained no wires, however, rather it was carved into his face in what seemed like a hurried fashion. A line of dried blood ran from just under the party hat and down his face. The hat just barely covered the hole in his forehead. Derek rubbed his head in dismay as his guests made such a scene. While he pulled his pistol from the back of his pants, Derek had a thought. He and his friends could be happy forever, just as long as none of them got away.